Hello, everyone, and welcome Lynn Xie to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, William. This is actually my first ever podcast, so it'll definitely be a good learning experience.
Definitely, and I'm sure it's gonna be the first of many podcasts, perhaps for you to be on in the future to share your expertise and insights in. For our audience, Lynn is a HBS alumni and currently works for platform products and partnerships at YouTube Shopping. What's really unique about Lynn's experience is that she's actually been with YouTube for over 5.5 years since graduation. And that's not very typical, is it, Lynn, typically, for an HBS alumni to stay for over half a decade at their first company after graduation?
Saying over half a decade makes me feel so old, William.
Experienced.
Totally. So I think you're right. It is rare to stay at the same company. And to give a little bit of context, this is actually my second role within YouTube. So it does feel like a new role. However, my current role is I work in product partnerships at YouTube Shopping, which in a nutshell basically means that I partner with different merchants and platforms to grow our YouTube Shopping business and our YouTube Shopping set of features. And I graduated 5.5 years ago from HBS in 2018, which feels like yesterday. It's really crazy to see how quickly time flies. And I know that's pretty rare to stay at the same company, but I think what's really interesting about YouTube and being at Google is that when you do switch roles within the company, it feels like a completely different job. So happy to elaborate on that later on too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, because you've been at this role or were at this one company for so long, you've had an opportunity to go deep. And so we'll just dive right into specifically, I think, what is really interesting for, I think, our audience to learn about, which is, people go to YouTube typically to watch videos, to be entertained or to learn or to relax, whatever, I think the most common thing YouTube is used for. But for our audience, what is YouTube shopping? Because you don't think typically you go to YouTube to buy something, right? You might learn about something on YouTube and then you go somewhere else to buy it if it looks cool.
That's exactly the journey that we're working on. What you said, William, is that subconsciously, I think many people go to YouTube to actually get inspiration for what to shop. Myself, for example, if I'm trying to purchase a product, maybe it could be as simple as a mascara or something more complex like a TV. I think not only do I read reviews online, but I actually go to YouTube and watch people that I trust, creators that I've built a relationship with through watching their content over the years, and I trust their opinion to review those products. And ultimately that those reviews then inform my actual purchasing of those products. And so the high level nutshell is that we're really enabling creators to earn on YouTube through sharing their favorite products with their fans. And they can either really earn a commission through our affiliate program by recommending other brands. And also, many creators are now creating their own brands as well. For example, Chamberlain Coffee by Emma Chamberlain or Feastables Chocolate by Mr. B. So we're seeing this whole movement towards influencers and creators creating their own brands and leveraging their own YouTube channels and their content on different platforms to sell those products. And really it enables viewers like you and me to easily purchase those products without leaving the content. And it also is beneficial to the merchants, obviously, and the brands because their products are being featured on YouTube content. So that is in a nutshell what YouTube shopping strives to be in our mission.
Absolutely. Well, part of that success, of course, is your role in, YouTube slash Google having played a critical role over the last few years in building that. What specifically have you done, or what specifically has been your role in kind of really improving the customer journey for people to come to YouTube, not only learn, but also making it easier to shop directly, perhaps on the platform?
Definitely. And I think what's interesting about this role is does feel like a startup within a larger company. And so many times I can talk about my role overall, my goals, but my day to day changes every single day. Almost like you have to come up with different solutions to unexpected problems all the time. But in a nutshell, I work on enabling integrations with different e-commerce platforms and merchants to enable their products to be featured by creators. And when we say featured by creators, we mean for creators to be able to tag those products when they're actually uploading videos, in addition to uploading the video and the metadata, like the title and the actual description. There's now options for creators to actually tag different products that are being featured in their videos. So, for example, I work with Shopify. This is an example of an e-commerce platform to ensure that creators with Shopify stores can actually sell their products
Mhm.
and tag their products on YouTube. And also merchants on Shopify can have their products be featured in creators' videos. So ultimately, it's really about making that journey much more productized and easier for the merchant, the viewer, and the creator.
That definitely sounds really critical towards connecting everything together. And I'm really interested in this space because this has really been picking up over the last 1, 2, 3 years in making the platform in which the content is created to entertain, the to where to draw in the users, the consumers, to YouTube. But I wanted to talk about a little bit about it's not only YouTube, it's also TikTok. It is Instagram. A lot of these other content platforms are doing the same. Why do you think that is, or what kind of really started this trend to kind of make the video, where the content,
Yeah, that's
entertainment
that's a great
content
question. I think
um,
maybe
is
taking
to
a step
also be that
back.
platform, or how tight does it
So,
need to be connected?
did I freeze up for a second, or did you get what I had
You're
mentioned?
all good.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, I think there was a few minutes delay or a few seconds delay. But maybe taking a step back, I think in terms of what you've said, I think what's really interesting is that platforms are now leaning into what creators and influencers have already been doing for years,
Right.
right? So, in many ways, the creators push what ultimately platforms build, is how I see it in terms of creators have been using description links on YouTube videos, for example, to share their favorite products to get an affiliate commission for years now, really since it's kind of part of the DNA of YouTube. As you
Right.
watch videos, they'll probably say, hey, check out the description for a link to the product that I just mentioned. But that process is inefficient at the end of the day because it takes time for the creators to
Mhm.
actually insert those links into the description. As a viewer, it's difficult for me to find, right? Like I have to go below the line, scroll down, try to find this link that doesn't actually tell me much about the product. Then I leave the video, which is actually counter to what the creator ultimately wants, which is more, watch time and engagement. And then I maybe purchase something and the merchant doesn't actually know that this is coming from YouTube. So ultimately, like what we're seeing is that this behavior is already happening. Creators are already driving so much of commerce and purchasing decisions. We just want to create actual product features to make that journey easier. So ultimately, we're building on top of what creators are doing and making that journey a lot more easier by building features that are automating this process as opposed to doing this manual description link type of behavior.
Right. Whereas it's previously all on the content creators to do it. You're making it easier, and hopefully adding value to both the content creators and the consumers to just find the things they want to find ultimately. Uh,
Absolutely.
speak Speaking of that, on the innovation in this front, what are some specific innovations perhaps that YouTube is doing that's bringing it to that consumer shopping experience? I know you mentioned earlier specifically Shopify is one such a great, company that has made it so easy for so many people to create an online shop for products. Can you talk a little bit more about that situation?
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about the types of features that YouTube is building out and other platforms as well to make this journey, as I mentioned, easier. So examples of that would be, for example, a frictionless checkout experience is something that platforms are striving to achieve, where you can potentially purchase the product without actually leaving the platform, right? I think that's one thing. Another is like creating different features in which the creator can just search for products and drag and drop them onto their videos. So when I'm a creator and I'm uploading a video, I can actually have a search bar where I can search for a specific brand, a specific item, a specific SKU, whatever it may be. And as long as that brand has enabled their products to show up on YouTube, that is possible for creators to search for and drag and drop. And then on the viewer's perspective, the drag and dropped products that creators have tagged are actual visual images that are overlaid on top of the video. So they're no longer a text description link. So what happens is that you and I can then click on that image, and I can, even show some examples. Um, if you can click on that, what happens is that you can then see all of the rich product details, the information about the product, and
Hmm.
ideally end to end be able to purchase that product without leaving the platform. That's something we're still working on. A lot of the integrations we've done is still having the transaction take place on the merchant site. But one thing that we're looking to do is make that purchase journey a lot more seamless as well.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the analytics or the results of that. Has it? How long has this project or continued development been happening, and have you started to see success in some ways of increasing traction with consumers to shop directly or seeing that data metric?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's still obviously early stages for YouTube shopping, but definitely seeing behavior of consumers recognizing these features and creators leveraging these features. Like when we launched our affiliate program for creators, I can't share exact numbers, but we've had thousands and thousands of creators join on their own in a self-serve manner. I think it's really about tying together the ecosystem of
Hmm.
creators as well as merchants. And so it's kind of like a network effect at the end of the day, where you
Right.
need all of these products available on YouTube or another platform for creators to be able to tag. And the more creators that join the program, the more merchants are willing to join, and vice versa. And so ultimately, I think we're working in a two-pronged approach where we're trying to get as many creators to join as possible and as many eligible merchants or merchants to join as possible, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some kind of big names that you'd say are like the content creators that have really bought into this program publicly or that you view are successes? Is it more of like the content creators like, Mr. Beast or other big names out there who built their success on YouTube? Or when you say merchants, do you also mean like Costco and Walmart who are building with like content creators or partnerships to showcase great deals? I know there are some great Costco deals, and some influencers built that to showcase, oh, this is what you can buy on buy at Costco, and build that whole content on YouTube or other platforms.
That's a great question, William. I really think it's both at the end of the day. I can give
Hmm.
you examples, right? So we work with, for example, a top beauty creator, Manny MUA, and he's a really good example of kind of being in two different spaces. One, he is a beauty creator who is known for reviewing beauty products. So he'll review products from Sephora, products from Ulta, products from Sigma Beauty, whatever it may be, right? And so our features allow someone like Manny to earn a commission through recommending those products. And he has millions of subscribers. So subscribers watch him for that content for his content because they trust his recommendations, right? So that's one way in which he's leveraging features. The other, which I think is really interesting, is many creators get their start from reviewing other brands' products, but eventually, when they gain a following and they build up their own brand, many of these creators will actually launch their own brand altogether. So Manny MUA has actually launched Lunar Beauty, which is his own beauty brand. And what's interesting is now his beauty brand is part of our affiliate program so that other creators can tag Lunar Beauty products and talk about his brand. So he's like representative of kind of both sides of this coin, right? And then on
Yeah.
top of that, to what you said earlier, yes, we're also working with the large retailers, right? For example, Walmart and Target are part of our affiliate program, and creators can tag their products. So it's
Mm.
really about engaging all of these different components of the ecosystem, the creator merchant, the creator, and the traditional retailers and merchants.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's also talk about some business case examples and leadership lessons. Perhaps, you were there from graduation 2018 from HBS through now. And so you've experienced a very interesting cycle of COVID impacting the traditional shopping experience, COVID impacting just how we interact day to day, and for events. Let's talk about online shopping. Let's talk about COVID and events. So specifically, I know we talked briefly about something that happened during COVID, and that's New York Comic Con. Could you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And just to give a little bit of context, so this was actually before I joined the YouTube shopping team. I was on the
Hmm.
film and TV partnerships team at YouTube. And
Perfect.
a lot of what we were focused on was, bringing high quality sort of media and entertainment content to YouTube. And so what you mentioned about COVID was so disruptive, as you can imagine, for so many different industries, but especially for live conventions where that can no
Mm.
longer happen in an actual convention space, which is so much of what sort of comprises events like Comic-Con. And
Mm.
so what we did was we reached out to New York Comic-Con, and we know that COVID forced their cancellation of their 2020 event. And we decided, let's bring this event to YouTube, right? This is a great opportunity. We have a variety of different features on YouTube that allow you to comment live, to allow you to have live chats, like where there's lots of engagement levers that we can use to simulate what that experience would be like in real
Right.
life. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, but what's exciting about bringing something like that online is that you can reach an audience that's much larger than just the ones who are able to attend in person, right? So we approached New York Comic Con, we negotiated a deal to really allow all of their panels. So at the end of the day, I think it was about almost 170 panels over the course of 4 days, and having each of those panels essentially being streamed or being uploaded to YouTube for anyone to see at the end of the day. And I think it was really exciting. And we were able to also secure a sponsorship with Dell's gaming brand Alienware. And I think at the end of the day, it's like the first time in its 15-year plus history that they went completely virtual, and really tapped into a much more global audience, and ended up reaching an audience that was much larger than the actual physical event.
Yeah, that is definitely really incredible that you were able to act so swiftly, I think, during kind of this period. Uh, what was kind of the kind of mindset for yourself, perhaps, or what led to the inspiration to reach out to Comic Con or to build this partnership? Was it a relationship that you felt that was already like happening with New York Comic Con, or was it more of like for people on the outside, was it more of like, oh, you guys saw in the news that New York Comic Con was being canceled and everything was being shut off because of COVID, and you're like, why not reach out?
It was a little bit of both. So when I was on the film and TV partnerships team at YouTube, I was managing the relationship with Disney. And as you know, Disney owns several different major franchises and brands, and one of them being Marvel. And
Of course.
Marvel every year has a large presence at all the Comic Cons, and they have a, obviously a huge presence at D24, or Disney's own convention, right? So I think, or D23, excuse me. So I think what's really exciting is that when we were talking to Marvel, I think that was the inspiration of like, okay, this year, obviously things were disrupted. How can we bring some of this content onto YouTube? And then it was, of course, also the articles around New York Comic Con being canceled. And so we ultimately, I think it was like almost like the perfect storm where we wanted to be as helpful as possible to both
Yeah.
our partners that we were managing and this exciting new opportunity to bring to YouTube. And ultimately, we just didn't want to let the fans down either, right? Like even after cancellation, I think there's ways in which we wanted to make sure the fan base could watch this content.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and that's another great example of, I think, as you mentioned, a partnership that you can build at, in whatever enterprise that, if you're in whatever career you're doing in these kind of crisis situations. But perhaps a little bit more back to YouTube shopping and your experience of another successful partnership, which I believe is Fourth Wall. What was kind of the situation, or why prompt that partnership?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe to take a little bit of a step back too. So we have, different types of integrations with YouTube shopping.
Hmm.
One of the ones which, Fourth Wall falls under is really the ability for what we call a merch platform to be able to enable creators or you and me even to go onto their site. It's completely end to end. They're called print on demand, basically merch companies where you and I can go and pick templates of different shirts, bags, whatever it may be, pick a design. We can upload our own design. And then within 5 minutes, you have a store. And ultimately, the way the business model works is that if you or I or a fan orders a specific product, it's only produced if that order is made. So it's really a print on
Right.
demand type of business model. And so ultimately, that's what we want to service to a lot of our creators at the end of the day. A lot of the larger creators, they have like their own teams, they have like a Shopify store, everything is managed in terms of they can create their own products, they can fulfill their own products, they have a whole team. But then there's a whole, tranche of YouTube creators who need that support, right? So ultimately, these are creators that need an end-to-end solution that can help them create merch in minutes to help fulfill to their fans. And that's why examples like Fourth Wall are such a great opportunity because it's, first of all, one of the largest merch platforms with over 50,000 creators, but it's also completely self-serve. And ultimately, we want to make the creators' lives as easy as possible and enable creators of all sizes to be able to have merchandise within a few minutes, right?
Definitely. And it seems like it's a great opportunity to both improve connection for the content creators and also ultimately to make YouTube just be that much more important in the process and make it more valuable because simply it is more convenient for everybody to kind of just go to where people spend time ultimately. Diving into kind of this industry that now you've been a part of for multiple years, what are some kind of industry trends? And I know we briefly talked about, Instagram, TikTok, and I believe even Amazon now has kind of a content or like kind of like a TV show where they're pushing content of various products that people can then shop directly. What are some industry trends that you might see from whether it's TikTok, YouTube, or Instagram to drive that shopping behavior?
Definitely. I mean, I think it's ultimately our tech platforms are becoming e-commerce players more and more, right? Because I think tech platforms recognize that this behavior, as I mentioned, is already happening, and how can they facilitate that experience? Well, that means that you have to take a more active role in terms of one, like matchmaking between brands and creators. There are so many brands out there who want to work with creators and influencers, but they don't necessarily have all of those connections off the top of their head, right? And so ultimately, if you are a platform with millions of creators that are using your platform, like how can you bridge that gap and match make and make sure that brands are working with creators that fit into their specific needs and vice versa, that creators are working with brands that fit with their content. All of that stuff is like you can take a passive approach, but I think ultimately these
Right.
platforms, including YouTube, taking a more proactive approach to make sure that that connection is happening, right? And the second is like making that experience easier, right? Like as I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
so offering viewers that information about the products on the platform itself. So you don't have to be redirected to multiple different places, actually lose track of the content that you're watching. But it's like, hey, like I can watch this video, I can purchase this product, I can see all the information I need to see to make a purchasing decision about that product and actually feel confident enough to purchase that product, maybe even in the future with one click, right? And then I can still go back to watching the video. And so it's like ultimately that's beneficial for the creators as well, because it's like you're not taking people away from that content. And then I think the third element of tech platforms is like finding things that are working globally and also trying to figure that out and how to have that work in the US, for example. So, live shopping has been such a huge phenomenon in sort of APAC and Asian
Mhm.
markets. And maybe that behavior hasn't yet caught on in the US,
Right.
right? I don't think necessarily people are watching hours of live shopping content, but it could in the future. So we're getting ahead of those
Yeah.
trends, figuring out getting that technology in place to enable brands to do, let's say, a partnership with a creator to do a live stream shopping event that has exclusive drops or exclusive discounts that happen only on
Yeah.
that live stream and creating an event out of it. So not to go on too much about this, but I think there's a lot of excitement about like the innovation is really happening with the actual creators, right? And it's like the tech platforms are creating these tools and features to make that much easier for all the parties involved. And I'm happy to go
Absolutely.
into more, but that's sort of my top of mind in terms of why tech platforms are really becoming players in this space.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, I think you mentioned Nikki LaRose, who is the makeup artist who built their own brand, from reviewing others to now that their own brand itself. And of course, there's Mr. Beast as, as the one of the clearest examples of content creators who've built a successful brand and products that then is sold in traditional markets as well as in Walmart's, as well as in like online retail. I'm curious about your thoughts on kind of like how much bigger it can go, or where is the influencer or content creator economy driving towards. A lot of these are relatively smaller product. It's not, they're not selling like a house or anything generally per se, but kind of what are the opportunities and what are the kind of products that you think could be sold, and grow upon in this space.
That's $1 million question. Like, if I had the answer to that question, I think I would be super successful in my career. But at the end of the day, I feel like it's maybe a misnomer to think that the large creators are the only ones who make like very successful product lines. Obviously,
Mhm.
that's, helpful when you have an audience the size of Mr. Beast, which I believe he has nearly 300 million subs, which is crazy, like the size of the US population.
US, yeah.
But I think it's also about a lot of sort of torso creators who might have 100,000 subscribers, but they're really dedicated subs that watch
Right.
all of their videos. And these creators also do, maybe it's not their own brand necessarily yet, but it could very much be collaborations with existing brands. And I think that's where, like, an area where I see a lot of growth. So we have a company in our affiliate program called BK Beauty. They are an influencer sort of driven beauty company that really specializes in makeup brushes of all things. So it's very specific, right? And then you have creators that work with this company, and Nikki LaRose is one of those examples. We have another creator, Hot and Flashy, and they have very dedicated like viewers. And ultimately, what they've done is these companies have reached out to these creators that have an audience that aligns with their specific products and say, hey, let's create a custom collection together. So I, BK Beauty, am still creating the brushes, but you help me in terms of figuring out what types of brush bundle would make sense. And that's done incredibly
Mm.
well. And we've seen that sell out, very, very quickly with their viewers and fans. So I think ultimately there's the opportunities, of course, like Mr. Beast in the world, where he's creating
Mhm.
global conglomerates, but there's also sort of this other tier that we're seeing a lot of growth in terms of just collaborations with brands.
Yeah. I also, in this day and age, you got to bring up artificial intelligence in some ways and how that might mix into the shopping itself. And we've seen a number of companies experiment with AI influencers, non-real people that have then been the face of a company or a product, and then they themselves then partner with other companies to do that. What are your thoughts on kind of these, AI or digitally generated influencers? They might be more so on like TikTok and Instagram than long form content, especially that is on YouTube, perhaps. But do you see kind of a success in this model, or adaption, or belief to, for an AI or digitally created content creator to kind of effectively push or recommend shopping in some ways? Or is that something maybe sort of like how Amazon or other companies do kind of like their own products? Like, could an AI or digital content be used to have YouTube's own shopping, content?
That's honestly, maybe I'm being old school about my answer here. But I wanted to go back to the concept of really like trust, right? And when we did a
Right.
survey on YouTube a little while ago, I think almost 90% of YouTube viewers say they basically purchase things on YouTube because creators give them recommendations they trust. And how do you build that trust? And that's through like, years sometimes of watching your favorite content creators and building that relationship and trying out products that they've recommended and saying, hey, like I can trust these creators' recommendations because I have that relationship with that creator from viewing their content. And I think that's where the AI piece is maybe difficult for me, because I think from like a sort of building that trust standpoint between a
Right.
creator and an ultimate like sort of viewer or buyer, there is that human element. And I think at
Of
this point
course.
at least, the AI creators cannot necessarily simulate that. I think from a short form content perspective, where you're just going through shorts or you're going through TikToks, you might not be building that same kind of trust or relationship with each individual creator because it's more about short form content. So maybe there's something there to be said, but I think the YouTube sort of bread and butter is that relationship between creators and their fans. And I think that's something that'd be difficult to replace. Where I do see AI making a difference, and you already see this in terms of making sort of creators' lives easier. So whether that's like automatically generating titles or descriptions or metadata or music for content or backgrounds, I think all of that makes so much sense to tap into AI. But in terms of the actual creator themselves, I think that's really where the magic is, and it's hard to replicate in an artificial manner.
Well, that's definitely good to hear, and I hope it's a sigh of relief to many of the content creators out there that AI is not coming for their jobs or their livelihoods, at least hopefully not anytime soon. Um, what are you particularly excited about in this space, perhaps in this next year or two, that you see as kind of driving forward the most dynamic changes and opportunities that you're passionately working on?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I'm very passionate about is bringing affiliate to YouTube in a scaled way, where basically instead of using those affiliate links, like creators, as I mentioned, can tag products from any brand that they recommend. And then the brand benefits because obviously they're getting, increased sales and gross merchandise value. The creator benefits from commissions, the viewer benefits from purchasing. So I think what I'm really excited about is working on scaling affiliate. And as I mentioned, we have an upcoming launch with an e-commerce platform where their merchants will be enabled. Their eligible merchants will be able to sign up for YouTube affiliate in just a few steps. I actually tested it
Mhm.
myself with a test account the other day, and it literally takes probably like 3 minutes end to end, maybe even less. And ultimately, after you sign up, you're able to
Mhm.
see your performance in the program. You're able to see which creators are tagging in your program. So to go from an environment where everything was done manually and working with different parties out there to have it all be kind of owned and operated in one area, self-serve on YouTube, on Google Merchant Center, I think it's exciting to see that type of innovation, and something that I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Definitely. Well, I wanted to dive into this next segment of our podcast, which is specifically about your journey to where you are now. And what I think is really interesting is you were an econ major, government minor at Dartmouth, focused on economic policy. You've worked in government, during the time, I believe, roughly of the a little bit after the financial crisis. What was the pivotal moments for yourself, perhaps in this space, from college and beyond, that led you to HBS and eventually led you to YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, and definitely it's crazy because I remember Lehman Brothers coming to Dartmouth and trying to do a recruitment event right before right before the crisis. So I definitely feel very old now, but yeah, so I started off wanting to do economic policy, and I did two internships, one at the Treasury Department, one at the New York Fed. It was just a crazy time because it was just post the bailout era. I remember people scurrying around, some people even sleeping under their desks. I remember meeting Timothy Geithner, who actually went to Dartmouth as well, and he was like fist bumping all of the interns. So some really good memories. But I think what was really pivotal for me was that when I was there, I had a really like a good relationship with the boss, my boss that I was working for, the Treasury Department, and she gave me this advice where she told me like, look, like her career is so dependent on the administration that's actually in power. And she had very little control in terms of what things would look like if a different, party takes power and what her position could end up, looking like. And I think she mentioned to me that, this isn't necessarily like an easy type of career path, and there's a lot of these macroeconomic elements that could really impact you. And so I remember, realizing that this was a really great experience, but I think I realized at that moment that the political sort of arena wasn't really for me. And happy to go on more, but I basically kind of went back to the drawing board, and I think this is the classic case of being an econ major and not exactly knowing what you wanted to do. And so I
Hmm.
got swept up into the whole banking, recruiting, consulting, like recruiting wave. And I ended up,
Yeah.
all things on the other side, right? So I went from the public sector really to the private sector and actually working at Morgan Stanley, doing global capital markets at the time, working with financial institutions. And so I'm happy to delve
Mhm.
into that, but that was sort of how I went from the public sector to the private sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think a lot of people who are trying to figure things out right after college, a few years after out, they want to, they could take a very safe and, reliable sector in the private sector, consulting, banking. It's great pay, it's great opportunities. And you yourself kind of dove into that a little bit. I'm curious about your experience there, but what ultimately led you into like kind of the path you're on now of entertainment? What drew you from that, perhaps more secure, or and perhaps lucrative sector in banking and consulting towards kind of this entertainment path? Or what made you excited, right? You're saying consulting or banking isn't exciting in that respect?
Well, I wouldn't want to put that on the record. I think for me personally, I just wanted to gain the skills and to kind of get that 2 year analyst experience because I've heard from so many of my mentors and people that I
Yeah.
really look up to that that's just a great foundation for any job. But I think I always knew that I was not passionate about finance. I wanted to get something out of the experience and train myself, but I never wanted to end up in necessarily like sort of finance or investment banking. So I think maybe that was sort of my mindset going in. And to be honest, I think that was a helpful mindset because it was a very tough 2 years. I think a lot of people have gone through that analyst experience, know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, I think for me personally, like coming from more of this economic policy background, I had never done an internship in investment banking. I didn't know how to model. I didn't know how to use Excel or the shortcuts. I didn't know all the ins and outs of like capital structures. And so for me, it was even more challenging because I kind of came in without having done that internship. And I
Right.
remember wanting to quit every day for the first 3 months or so. But then I think I found my footing and I found some mentors that meant so much to me, and people who would spend their time even like after work helping me drawing boxes and arrows, trying to sort of tell me about things that I clearly, needed help with. And ultimately, that's what made me survive is those relationships and those mentors. And I'm so glad. I think at the end of the day, I'm really glad I didn't leave. I'm really glad I stuck it out, because I think it just taught me something I wouldn't have gotten maybe from another experience, which was like grit. I think at the end of the day, it gave me a thicker skin, and it made me realize that I was going to be
Mhm.
okay and that I could take risks. I think what I was before, why I went into, banking is because I didn't want to take risks. And I think coming out of that experience, I felt like, you know what? I survived this. I I feel more confident to take that risk. And that's really where the soul searching came in, right? So I think I felt brave enough, after the 2 years to really spend some time thinking about what do I love outside of work. And one of my mentors actually said that to me is like,
Mhm.
think about what you do naturally, like with your own time, and think about how you can marry the work that you do with the things that you already love. And I think that's really where the entertainment industry came in. Like, I'm an only child. I grew up watching probably way too much TV, lots of movies. And so I just always loved sort of the film industry. And it was something that I was already passionate about, like, when I was young. And I think
Mhm.
when one of my best friends ended up moving from New York to LA to work at Disney in a finance role, that's what really got the gears turning. And so I won't bore you with all the steps, but basically reaching out to her, talking to Disney, I ended up stumbling into this really interesting role where it was a strategy role, but it was around franchise management because Disney had just acquired Marvel and Lucasfilm at the time. And so for me, it was like still in the business world where, the analytical skills I had built up in banking were valuable, but it was also in this like creative sort of company that I had never been in before. And I think that's the first time in my life I realized, hey, like you can actually work in an industry that you feel like very passionate about. So that was sort of my personal journey to entertainment.
And you're at this point, you're diving into entertainment, you're at Disney. What made you believe that an MBA is the next step for you, or to go back to school for 2 years to take a break in your career, um versus continuing at Disney, which at that time in 2014, 2015, 2016 was probably among the most exciting times. Its franchise, its I guess successes in entertainment was definitely among the best times in the company's history.
I still have such a soft spot for Disney, I'm not gonna lie, but I think where I was sitting, it was a really interesting time, like into the 2016 timeframe, you could see this whole shift and sea change like coming to the traditional media industry, right? And it was really the
Mhm.
start of the streaming wars. You were seeing, obviously Netflix had taken off years before, but you really seeing tech companies leaning in to create streaming and to be able to be entertainment players. And I could see that disruption happening, at Disney, and like all the discussions we had around streaming and all of the sort of future of franchises and theaters and all of these sort of work streams. And I think for me, I wanted to get that holistic experience at HBS to really get kind of that tech experience to supplement a lot of what I'd learned already in entertainment. And I wanted to go, I think that's really where a lot of the courses I took. So I know you probably, of course, heard of Anita Barce and Henry McGee, took a lot of their media courses. But ultimately, I also took a lot of tech classes from like Joffy's class on platforms and Gompers on like scaling tech ventures. I think that's really where I realized that I wanted to be in a place where traditional media was really mixing with technology, and being at a media tech company was really where I wanted to be. And I was always fascinated by the concept of an open platform where content can be created by you or me or anyone we know, and the type of sort of scale that that type of platform had. And so that's why YouTube was something that was always sort of in the back of my mind and became the forefront of my mind when I was at HBS. So I was very, very targeted in terms of my journey, which was scary at times because you can imagine it's a very non-traditional path. And so when all of my classmates were getting offers and clear sort of next steps, I think I was feeling, anxious. But at the end of the day, I'm really glad that I had a very specific kind of journey at HBS, and ultimately it's really helped guide me to where I am today.
Absolutely. And, for our listeners, those who might be current HBS students, future HBS students, those interested in kind of a career in media, entertainment, what are some like lessons that you or advice for listeners who might be interested in kind of following a similar path or a path that is a little bit less, trodden by, people post MBA? What do you think people should really focus on ultimately?
These are great questions. And of course, you're a podcaster because I was going to say these questions are so insightful. I think for me, really take advantage of how incredible the professors are at HBS. And I will, tell a personal sort of story about actually, Professor Anita Alberse, who actually helped me decide ultimately to take this job at YouTube. I had an offer
Shout
at
out.
a more traditional sort of media company doing a rotational leadership program, which was honestly, it sounded like an amazing opportunity, but it was much more like trad media focused. Then there was this sort of uncertain opportunity at YouTube that sounded interesting, but was also riskier. And I remember talking to her on the phone, and she was at the airport of all places, and she just sort of said to me, like, you have to do the decision that you're going to regret the least at the end of the day. And it feels like your heart's already set on this particular role, but it's just that you're maybe nervous about taking that leap. And I just think, having these types of professors who have so many connections, so many experiences in the space is really rare at HBS. And so, like, really leaning into that beyond just the coursework, but getting advice from them, I thought for me it was like, personally a huge defining moment and pivotal moment in my career. Right. And then I think the other thing is like take advantage of a lot of these treks that different sort of I think different areas offer. So for me, what was really helpful is we went on an entertainment and media track in my EC year, I believe, and we went all over. We went to actually everything from agencies to traditional media companies to like the Netflix new media companies of the world. And I think that was also very, very helpful ultimately in terms of what I wanted to do. So yes, take advantage of all the resources at HBS because that's something that I think now, after graduating, I realized that I should have taken advantage of even more. And it's a really, really special environment that has some amazing people.
Definitely, and hopefully some ECs who listen to this will take Professor Anita's class, take a few of these other highly recommended professors. So shout out to them. What about, I guess, some advice for career success? And you've worked at a single company for 5+ years now, and you've been promoted. You've had career success that allowed you to take on really important projects and roles. What are some skills? What are some things that listeners should do in their careers, whether it's entertainment, whether it's just a more general career that allows them to be successful in one company, perhaps, and to grow in one company in multiple roles?
Definitely. I think this is honestly my own personal sort of journey, but for me, it's like taking on projects that are outside of your immediate scope. I think it's so easy to say, oh, well, like I don't really have time for that. I already have so much on my plate. But I think in the past, where I've had career advancements or ultimately met amazing people who led to promotions or led to like more scope in my career is actually taking those risks. And to give a quick example, it's like I was covering for someone when they were on maternity leave, and then there was this huge project that actually was the start of my shopping journey. I don't think I can share too many details, but there was a huge project YouTube was exploring, and I was very junior at the time, and I was nervous about working on it, but there was no one else there to work on it. And so, actually, a VP essentially took me under his wing at YouTube and we worked on this project together. It didn't end up going through even at the end of the day, but what happened was I formed that relationship with the VP. I actually ended up meeting my now manager through that project, and it had nothing to do with my actual scope. Right. So I think take those risks. And when you think it's something that, oh, it's just going to take extra time, it's not actually going to help me, you'll never know how it ends up helping you. And I think the other thing is like, if, especially if you're working in tech or in media, like never stop learning. I think for me, it's like, I try to build new skills, which sounds, obvious, but I think a lot of the times like we're really tired after a full day's work. There's so much on our plate that's like hard to keep up with what's happening in the world. And for me, even though I'm in a sort of more business role, I think taking tech courses, getting up to speed on things like how, APIs work and how SQL or querying databases, like all this stuff is probably, not in my job description, but I've found that having sort of that extra knowledge makes it so that when you talk to a product manager, when you talk to an engineer, it just makes you maybe more credible at the end of the day. And it's also something that continues, like I think being at a tech company, even if you're in a business role, like learning some of those tech skills can really broaden your horizons. And so I think those are the two things that have really been, really helpful to me. And I hope that, can be helpful for others.
Definitely. And I think my last question to you is looking ahead for those that are at HBS and for those that aren't. We do this kind of a 10-year reflection and also reunion. You look back 10 years from now, 5 years, most people haven't changed too much, but it's at the 10-year mark really where, a lot of changes are happening in their people's lives. So for yourself, what are perhaps in, 5 years from now for yourself, that'd be roughly 10 years. What are you excited or hoping to explore both in your personal and career journey as you continue to kind of grow in success in this field? What are you wanting to take a risk on to, or kind of to push the boundaries on for yourself?
That's a great question. I think for me personally, um, I'm really interested in exploring more of a startup and entrepreneurial environment. I think my whole career, as we talked about, I've been at large companies, whether it's Morgan Stanley or Disney or now Google. And I think I've gotten a taste of what it feels like to work at a startup. However, it's still a startup within a large company, right? And so I think for me, I think I feel more equipped to take on that risk of trying something a little bit more entrepreneurial and putting on those multiple hats. I think the other element for sure is building on those product skills a bit more. I don't think I mentioned this before, but I was also doing a product management rotation a few recently. And I think what I've realized is that I love the business development aspect and doing the deals and helping with the integrations and coming up with a strategy. But I also really love the actual launching of products and the launching of features and all of the different elements that working with UX, working with engineers. And so I think a part of me also wants to explore that product management passion that I've uncovered in the past few months.
Definitely. That sounds all very exciting. And I'm sure our listeners and myself would be very excited to see where your career goes in a few years. And perhaps if this podcast lasts longer than a few years, would love to
For
maybe have
sure.
you back one day to reflect on that. But this has been a wonderful episode. And thank you, Lynn, for appearing on the podcast and sharing some of your insights and experiences at YouTube, at Disney, and at ultimately your HBS experience. And thank you for appearing on this alumni podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm sure your podcast will last for all the years to come.
Well, it will definitely be on YouTube. So hopefully YouTube will the algorithm will like this episode. So
I wish I
thank you.
could help that, but unfortunately, that's out of my hands.
No worries at all. Thank you.
Take care.